Good afternoon, welcome back to the British Library Theatre. Welcome to everybody who's joining us online and from libraries around the country. It's great to have you all with us for this day. The World Builders, Film and Games Design, Fantasy in Film and Games Design. So today's next session, the Architecture, Fantasy and Film, from Karenina to Barbie, has some amazing designers for you. And they'll be hosted today by Dr. Jane Barnwell, who is Reader in Moving Image at the University of Westminster. So please do enjoy the event. Those of you who are watching online, you can put questions in the form below the video window, and we will read some of those out later. And those in the room can just do the normal thing, put your hand up and wait for the mic. Enjoy the session. Bye.
Thank you. So I'm delighted to welcome Sarah Greenwood and Katie Spencer to discuss two films in particular today, Anna Karenina and Barbie. Before we get into those films, I just wanted to say a little bit about Sarah and Katie. Sarah Greenwood and Katie Spencer were the production designer and set decorator, respectively, for the film Barbie, which recently became the highest-grossing film ever produced by Warner Brothers Studio and broke the American domestic box office record for the highest-grossing film directed by a woman. The award-winning team met at the BBC over 2 decades ago. The success of their long-time collaboration can be seen in their countless film credits, including Beauty and the Beast, Darkest Hour, Anna Karenina, Rebecca, and Sherlock Holmes. Today, we're going to focus on these two particular films, Anna Karenina, directed by Joe Wright, and the design cousin Barbie, directed by Greta Gerwig. I'd like to start by delving straight into Anna Karenina. Can you talk to us about how you began to build the world for Anna Karenina? Like, where did you begin?
I think you have to begin with the book, you know, even if it's, we had this amazing screenplay by Tom Stoppard, but you always begin with the book. And there's occasionally you have times when you think, I'm really lucky to work on this film, and Anna Karenina was one of them, because it's like one of my favourite books of all time. So it begins with the book, and then we had the amazing screenplay with Tom Stoppard, and then it took this strange route, which Sarah, you'll like to...
You know, it's, so incredible script, first of all. Incredible book, incredible script. And our approach was relatively conventional in so much as, you know, we were going to shoot, this is the Kremlin, you can see on the screen there. We were going to shoot 6 weeks in Russia, and then the rest of the time we were going to shoot in the UK, we're going to build sets. And so, you know, quite a conventional costume drama approach. And then the whole thing about going to Russia is that Russia got more and more kind of expensive, I suppose one could put it politely, you know, and difficult. And, you know, it's kind of like going like that. And it's just like, this isn't going to work. But the best thing about Russia was that we got to go there, which, you know, just to kind of get them to understand. I mean, it's such a massive subject, such a massive story and everything. But to go there and realise how, you know, even in our 2 weeks we were there, how Russian society works and everything. So we saw amazing things. We went around the amazing kind of Hermitage Museum and art galleries. And so it was like, it then turned because we couldn't afford it, basically. And, you know, the whole thing was about to collapse. And one of the locations we've been looking at in England was the Alexandra Palace. It's then derelict, and we were going to use that for just a small scene, and we were, you know, and so when they said, right, we're not going to go to Russia, we've got to find a different way of doing it. So they said, okay, can we shoot it in the UK? And it was like, oh God, here we go. And it was like, not. And then the next question was, can we shoot it within the M25? And if anybody here, yeah, it's a classic filmmaking term. The M25 means basically London filming, means you don't go have overnights, it's even less money. So it was kind of like, at that point, Joe and I just went, no, we can't. So then Joe phoned me up late one night and said, can we, if we built a theatre, a derelict theatre, can we shoot it all in a derelict theatre? And he said, for example, he described, I don't know how many people have seen the film, he described the scene where it's the horse race scene. And he described how we could do it in the theatre. And it was like, he said, and that was one of the most difficult scenes. If we can make that work in a theatre, then the whole film could work in a theatre. So we sat and we went through all our references, which some of which you're seeing on the screen now. We went through all our photographs from Russia, and we said, right, how are we going to make this work in this contained environment? We then decided that we could make it work. So Joe then took the idea to Tom Stoppard and said, what do you think? And he said, I will change one thing. And he wrote at the beginning of the screenplay, this all takes place in a derelict theatre. And that was it. So it was like, it throws it right back at us, didn't it? He just said, okay, how are you going to do it?
It's a great idea, he said. Good luck.
Idea. Off you go.
It's such a brilliant example of how you work, though. Like, those limitations have actually pushed your creativity forward in so many different ways, haven't they?
Yeah.
I mean, could you describe a little bit for people who maybe aren't familiar with the distinction between production designer and set decorator, how you both worked on that project, like what happened next? You know, that's such a leap of faith, isn't it? How did you then what was the creative and practical process to bring that to life?
I mean, this particular film was unique in a way because Tom Stoppard didn't change anything, and so it was still written as though it was in a drawing room of the Oblonsky house or something like that. But something like that then had to be set in the prop room. We thought it would work in the prop room of a theatre because we built the whole theatre, and then there was these sort of in-camera scene changes. So that was our Kira in our exterior park in the ice, and so that was the hardest thing. Where do you set these things, right? So it's difficult to explain how we work on a bizarre show like this, but if it was like a standard film like Pride and Prejudice or Atonement or something, the production designer, Sarah, what do you do?
Okay, I mean, so basically, having been to Russia, having seen all these things, looking, and these are a paint, that I think is actually Tolstoy's house, that, you take all these essences. That's a photograph that we took in St. Petersburg. Yeah. It's kind of like you look at what is the essence of what the scenes are about. St. Petersburg, what's the difference between St. Petersburg and Moscow? Completely different architecture. St. Petersburg looked west, Moscow looked back to its history and was very kind of, and it's how do you encapsulate that in what we're doing. So that's for example, this image that's up there now is that is the journeys through the landscape. So that's, I can't remember his name now,
That's Anna Karenina's son.
Actually, can we pause that slide, please?
So this is Sasha. Yeah. This is him playing with his train set, and that is the journey that takes Anna from between Petersburg and Moscow. And so that is, and the painting behind we actually did is based on an actual painting that we got from the Hermitage. This is a concept art, yeah. So this is a painting that we painted, and it was on the stage. It's very layered, and so that's the kind of Russian countryside, and that's all the windmill and the snow and everything. It's all representative of the journey. So it's kind of like, and this goes back to how we both came from theatre and how we how you work in theatre, which is very different from film, is that you get it down to the bare bones. It's how what is the essence of the scene? What do you absolutely only need for the scene? And that's the essence of how we did it. Really.
It is. And this is a very particular one because he's actually in a proscenium arch within the theatre. Yeah. And it's like a Russian doll sequence. So there he is, when we shot it, there he is, playing with a toy that basically Anna Karenina gave him as she gets on the train. To go and meet Oblonsky, her brother, who's being very badly behaved, and there she meets Vronsky, and the beginning of the love story and the tragedy that unfolds. So it's a very Russian doll analogy.
Absolutely, those layers, aren't they? And you've described it as a bit like being stuck in a doll's house, I think. You've both described it as that. And this is a really interesting image to dwell on, because it's also illustrating your love of, you kind of got this playful love of scale, haven't you? And can you explain a bit about how important that is in your sort of repertoire? You kind of do micro to macro, and you really have a lot of fun with it, don't you? And in this, I think we go from the toy to the real interior carriage.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us a bit about that?
And the exterior of the train as well, which we shot at Didcot railway station, which is a museum, has all these amazing trains and things, and we snowed up the whole of that, and then we put the proscenium arch of the theatre in Didcot railway station. This is all coming back to me now. It's like, what? Very complicated, and I think, are we showing the trailer of Anna Karenina or not?
Oh, I don't think. Yeah.
Have we got it? Because I just think it's
So
for those that haven't
yeah.
seen it, what
Yeah.
we're describing is very difficult.
Yeah.
But this, I think,
I
if
think
we look
that
at
would be
this
good
bit, I think it
if
might
that's
help.
possible. Yeah.
Might help a bit. Yeah. Can you turn the lights down? Yeah.
I was 18 when I got married. But it was not love. Your husband is a saint, and we must all cherish him for Russia's sake.
Romantic love will be the last illusion of the old order.
Have you known Count Vronsky long?
He's a rich, good-looking cavalry officer.
Dance with me.
I must warn you about something.
Warn me.
You may, by indiscretion, give the world occasion to talk about you.
This must stop. If you have any thought for me, you will give me back my peace.
There can be no peace for us. Only misery, my greatest happiness.
Oh, so this is love.
We are bound together by God, and this can only be broken by a crime against God.
Something's happened.
Not something, everything.
It would be a sin to help you destroy yourself.
Sensual desire indulged for its own sake is the misuse of something sacred.
The man who can't govern his wife's gone as far as he can go in government.
Anna isn't a criminal.
But she broke the rules.
Leave.
Leave my life. She'll be ruined.
Do you think I would let you have my son? You are depraved. A woman without honor. And this is what you want. Do you know what you want?
I love you.
Why?
Can't ask why about love.
I think that really helps.
Understand the madness we're
Yeah.
describing.
The idea of the theatre and being contained in that world, like we're really interested in world building today, aren't we? And that world is so beautifully contained within that space.
Oh, and what was interesting was actually we had to build the theatre as well as build everything that was within it in quite rapid time, wasn't it?
So yes, so when we decided not to go to Russia, we basically had 12 weeks to design, build,
Work it out.
work it out, you know, which was, you know. So we moved studios. We ended up in Shepperton. We had 4 stages. So that's the theatre, the main theatre set. Then backstage, below stage, the fly floor, you know, and then work out, as Katie says, everything that happened within it, the actual scenes that happened, the essence of the scenes that happened within it. So
The only things we shot on location as such, and we did go to Russia, was Levin's life, because we decided he was the authentic soul, so we can shoot that for reality, and everybody else is under these constraints. So they were put in this sort of fantasy of the theatre.
And the whole point about that, and it goes back to, you know, it's like what's your belief, and it's a kind of Brechtian question. It's what is your belief of where you are, and where you are is the actors believe that they are on ice skating on the River Neva, that they are, you know, in the ballroom here. They're in the Oblonsky drawing room that is set in the prop room of the theatre. So you just have this. They believe it, we believe it, and therefore they are. Do you know what I mean? That's the.
And I think, can you talk a little bit about the scenic painting for enabling that and assisting in us believing that? Because I think were there like over 50 different, and to help, can you tell us a little bit about that?
this is a concept of what you've just seen, the ice rink. So that is a very famous painting of the frozen river Neva in St. Petersburg. And so we painted that as a backcloth to the ice skating, and it was, is one of 50 or so.
But we discovered this artist when we went to Russia called Repin, which we don't really know here. And he was almost like a key in as well, wasn't he? Because of his portraits of the sort of the middle class and the working class of Russia then were amazing. And this is the cloth that...
That's the front cloth that we copied that was used not only in the Paris Opera but also used, that is a theatre in Petersburg, I can't remember the name of it. But and this is interesting. It's how everything is the same but different. How the Russians interpret the West, and so it's like the theatres are similar, but they have these boxes that are different. That you have the connection is different, and like all the architecture, so that I can't remember exactly what it is now, but it's kind of like the libraries are all English. These sports are all German.
Yeah, sports are German. I think, and all that. They have certain the French.
The French is and so you have all this it's kind of like this cherry picking of architecture, and they put them, so you literally walk from France into Germany, into England, into, it's an incredible place. And it really helped us understand what Tolstoy is writing about. It's kind of like the difference in societies, and the fact that Katie referred to Levin as being this true soul, the one true soul in the whole thing. Hence, he was in the real world.
He got out. He was allowed out, wasn't he?
You spoke about sort of like, having to do something because you haven't got an option. If we hadn't done this, this film wouldn't have got made, because we couldn't afford, as Sarah said, to go beyond the M25. We couldn't afford to just go and put a Russian stove in, like, I don't know, Chatsworth or anywhere like that. So this is, and I think it's a flawed film, but I also think it's a really valiant attempt at doing taking
an epic
story.
book.
Yeah,
it's such an epic story.
Yeah.
I mean, I think as well that sort of that research that you're talking about was so important, wasn't it? Because it's completely fed into then the creation of an artificial world, but it's informed by really intensive research. Yeah.
And I think as well, you talk about scale. I mean, we do love to play with scale, and which is why we call Anna Karenina the cousin of Barbie. They're playing a lot with scale, because I think, even when we have a model or a miniature, or you're doing something that's scaled down and things, it's a very, what you see on the screen, you can play with scale a lot with what we do. So, there we are in Moscow. That's Matthew McFadden being shaved on.
Yeah, he was great in it.
Can you describe a little bit about your collaboration with other key members of the team? Like this, we mentioned earlier, is directed by Joe Wright, and you've worked with him many, many times. How does that work? How does that collaboration, what is the sort of process? Because you've already got that kind of working understanding, haven't you?
I mean, I think before we did this with Joe, we'd done Pride and Prejudice, Atonement, Hannah, and The Soloist, a film in the States. So to be able to pivot like this so quickly, and also Seamus McGarvey shot it, but it was going to be Philippe Rousseau who did, we did the Sherlock Holmes films with. So, and of course Jacqueline Duran is a costume designer we work with a lot as well. And I think having that shorthand, it's like friendship, you can trust what people can do, and people can trust what you're saying. And I think that, like in any profession, I think, or in any life skill, I think the more you know somebody, the more you work well together, the better.
And also you kind of, you catch yourself. I mean, certainly this interpretation of putting this into a theatre space, at certain points we all, including Joe, went, what are we doing? I mean, seriously, you're kind of like, oh my God, I can't. And here's a funny story, right? So when we reinterpreted it into the theatre space, so Joe and I worked on it for a week, and we're working. Joe said, right, I've got to go for a meeting. It's on the Thursday before we present it to everybody on the Friday. He said, jump to the end and work your way back, because we had to figure out what happened. We did this, right? And then we presented it, and everybody kind of went, okay, we'll go with it. And then we found ourselves on the tech, out on this location of Ham House in England, and we're going, why are we here? Right, and I was going through my notes, and I was going, I can't find any notes. And Joe was going, why are we here? And he was going through his notes, he couldn't find anything on it. And we said, I don't think we're supposed to be here. And it was like this tiny little scene. And it was like, in coming from the front and coming from the back, something got missed in the middle. The two didn't meet. And we had this one location, which is actually in the film, because we didn't have a choice. We couldn't go anywhere else because we didn't have the time or the money to go anywhere else. And we were just told, you've got to make it work there. So we tried to make it look as kind of inauthentic but anyway, it was in English, it was Ham House on the River Thames.
I mean, things like that, there's, you know, there's always that kind of little fascinating kind of thing that happens in filmmaking, isn't it, where there are happy accidents.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think it's really interesting for people to hear about that, how things came to the screen that weren't necessarily intended that way. Yeah, totally. So the creation of those kind of twin worlds is really interesting in Barbie, isn't it? The real world and Barbie land. The distinction between those two is really important in lots of ways, isn't it? Can you tell us about how you developed the sort of twin concepts at the beginning? Where did you begin?
Yeah, I think it's it actually was the starting point, you know, putting images side by side of the real world and I think that's well was because it kind of fed into what we were looking for in Barbie Land. And what is Barbie Land? I mean, it doesn't actually exist in so much as
can we stay on these? Can we stay on this?
Can we?
Actually.
Okay, great, we've moved on. So
We're back.
Okay, so yeah, it's kind of like, you know, what is the essence of Barbie Land? Where does it come from? It's Americana. It's you know, it's this kind of very beautiful interpretation of America. And actually, is it? That's the question. Because when you look at the real Mattel toys, you look at the real Barbie dream house, they're not so pretty, actually. So, you know, so we have to kind of refine that as well. And
it really was a question of putting things side by side. I mean, literally taking photographs of sort of like palm trees that are in LA that are a little bit rat infested and you know, you've got rats up them, and putting perfect palm trees next to them and taking colour out of the real LA and obviously adding colour.
yeah, I mean,
The reason we keep coming back, everyone, to these sketches, we wanted to, Sarah's really kindly shared a really important part of her creative starting point, where she calls them scribbles, but you can see they're so elemental in how she's actually moved forward and realised the places in the film.
They're really important, these early days scribbles. To be fair, Sarah, she does them really quickly, she's thinking.
I'm talking at the same time as I'm
it
drawing.
captures the essence of it, and we all love them. And Sarah goes, oh, no, don't. But they absolutely, you tell stories. I mean, that's the waking up, that's the, you know, that's the boardroom. It's stunning, really good.
Yeah, I mean, I have... It's kind of what goes back to what do we do, you know, and it's kind of like the one thing I don't do particularly other than draw like that is draw. You know, I have amazing people who draw for me. I don't actually draw. It's communication and how you communicate what you want. And, you know, we're seeing a lot of references go through, so it's kind of like capturing the essence. And, you know, and that might be the thing about light, that might be the thing about shape, and it's kind of, and then you work with amazing concept artists. And that's how you...
I think that's really encouraging for a lot of people who might be listening. We can move forward now from the sketches. Thank you, Sarah. That was so kind of you to share them. I know she doesn't like to show them off, but it's very worth considering them and remembering exactly what you've said there, in that it's about communicating ideas. Absolutely crucial, isn't it? Did you use any real-life architectural references for Barbie Land?
This is an important one. This is an interesting one. This was put together very early days. And
right.
So, you know, it's Palm Springs is one of our critical... Even though we don't go to Palm Springs, and Barbie never lived in Palm Springs, she in fact lived in Malibu. But, you know, that's getting semantics. But, you know, it's like... in this reference, the bottom left is cakes painted by this incredible artist called Wayne Thibault, who has recently died. But he was a favourite reference of Greta's, and it's like, you know, it's the palette. It just gives us the palette, shapes the palette, and, you know, the purity of the colours, and the fact that he doesn't. I'm going to say it doesn't use black, although it looks a little bit black. Doesn't use pure black. And so it's kind of, you know, this is very early days of what is the palette, what is the mood of Barbie Land, how does it work? And, you know, the fakeness, the unreality of it.
Yeah,
So-
because we think of pink, but there's a lot more in that
There's a lot
palette than
more. Yeah.
pink, isn't there?
I mean,
What-
you'd guess if somebody you put that up and said, "What film is this referring to?"
Yeah.
You would, you know.
know it, yeah. So, you know, and I think it's interesting, you know, going back to the writing, actually, and obviously Barbie was never a book, but, she, you know, the writing, Barbie, what Greta wrote about Barbie was just phenomenal, you know, and Barbie's an empty vessel, really, wasn't she?
She is, because she's only what you know, how you play with her yourself. So, you know, that's very different from what we normally do. But Greta's script was, and Noah's was just stunning.
the transitions that we saw in the montage earlier, they're really important, aren't they, between the worlds? And you seem to have had a lot of fun with the modes of transport and the different settings that we travel through in that. Can you tell us a little bit about how you approached them and
That took quite a bit of working out, didn't it, really? Because
I mean, now you look at
how
this
she
film
wrote
and you
it.
just think, oh, that's simple. You know, that's obvious, duh, it's Barbie Land, you know. But actually to arrive at that took 9 months of chats with Greta before we even started the film, didn't it? You know, she was working on something else and, you know, we're having 2 weekly Zooms, just talking. And because it was like, you know, is it, you know, what is it? How are we going to do it? How is it, you know, you get out, she wants it to be very physical, very in camera, very referencing lots of other films. And
I think that's an important thing to say. A lot of this was in camera, and a lot of what people call fantasy films are not necessarily in camera. And this, because of the toy quality of it, this made it very different. Obviously, there was visual effects, you know, shots in it to enhance it. But, you know, it was a big use of miniatures, all the old style techniques. This was, the transitions were very theatrical, weren't they? They were from the old theatre traditions again.
yeah, I mean, in the script, you know, I think Weird Barbie actually says it. She says, oh, you go through the rip in the space-time continuum, right? And then 2 lines later says, well, of course, this isn't true, right? So, you know, so what is it? And then the thing that Greta kept going on about was the fact that it was very slow. She said, I think it goes at about 7 miles an hour. This is like, what is she talking about? You know, and it's kind of like, and so, you know, then we talked about different modes of transport, and then, you know, coming up with the idea that the camera is static, and, you know, the thing when you're on a train, and the foreground is going like that, and the midground is like that, and the background is like that, and then the far background, the sky is static, you know, so that you have this whole feeling of movement, and, you know, that they go left to right, or right to left, and the fact that they go cross backwards and forwards is really, you know, you're comparing Barbie Land with the real world a lot, you know, and you have this journey, and you kind of, it's so simple, you know exactly where you are and exactly what you're doing. This is the Richard Neutra house in Palm Springs, which was a critical reference for the build of Barbie Land, you know. So you look at all the Barbie dream houses, they start in the 1960s and they go right up to contemporary time, and they have every kind of, in fact, the 1960s ones are lovely. They're made of, you know, cardboard. And they're just too busy and fussy, and in fact, there isn't one that looks like that. But
No,
we
kind of like, because Greta's thing was it's got to look beautiful, Barbie Land, so it was taking the essence of what we love about mid-century Americana, and, you know, and this part of this Palm Springs architecture is so stunning.
Yeah, and also, you know, the photos of Slim Aarons, you know, they were a massive influence, and these mountains behind the house, which is where the festival of Coachella's in the area, those mountains, the San Jacinto Mountains, and they're amazing because you have such clear air, you know, so it feels, you know, this goes back to the hermetically sealed box that Barbie comes out of. That's another long story, but this is our hermetically sealed box, and so you have this clarity. And what's incredible, when you look at these mountains, you have the sunlight, and as the sun moves across it, you get these incredible shadows. You know, so originally I wanted to make the mountains slightly three-dimensional, slightly kind of bas relief, so that we could light it so that it would change. Of course, we couldn't afford that, but we painted it, and I think you might have seen earlier. There's, you know, the mountains. So we have the sky cloth, 50 foot high, 800 foot long. And you have the layers of mountains in front, 35 foot, 25 foot, the palm trees, and that's all in perspective. And in fact, the mountains that we painted, amazingly painted by incredible scenic artists, are painted in purple and ginger, and you just think, really, you're painting?
And how big was the brush?
And the brush was that big.
So it's
amazing
like to see them do it.
And you just go, okay, you have total faith and this comes back to the we're only as good as our teams, as our makers, as our doers. You know, it's kind of like it's such a collaborative joint effort.
And that's really interesting, the play that you're saying with that perspective, the way you do that kind of background, midground and foreground, with quite often really kind of drawing attention to it, which is really liberating for you, because usually the role of the production designer is to kind of keep all of that invisible, isn't it? So you're actually having fun with it and making it visible.
That little house,
yeah.
And those monsters might recognise that rather nasty plastic toy, is a real Mattel treehouse. That's who's Skipper's?
Midge, Skipper, Chelsea's, one of them.
Anyway, so Greta had actually written it into the script and put a photograph in the script. I mean, that's a rare thing. You know, the script was a continuous, with a photograph of that. And I was thinking, that is just so ugly, and this is so not what we want it to be. And then actually what we did, the solution to it was, they put it behind a picket fence, and there's a little sign that Katie put on it saying...
It's like a heritage house. So it's like a National Trust house in Barbie Land.
Yeah. And it was really... so in fact, it then works brilliantly for what it is, you know, and then all the Mattel execs come out of it and things like that. So it was fun, but very...
Can we talk about another of the houses? I know everyone's really interested in Barbie's house, obviously, but Weird Barbie. Can we talk about Weird Barbie's house? Because that is fascinating, and I know you've got some really interesting references for that, which haven't come up yet, I don't think.
We all wanted to do Weird Barbie's house.
Yeah.
And interestingly, it was the last thing we shot. We went to America and came back and we shot it, but nobody was really, we couldn't, you know, we had to keep it because everybody related to Weird Barbie, I think, more than anybody else.
We should skip through these.
Yeah.
Can we potentially, kind of go to Weird Barbie, which if we go a bit faster through them, maybe we could...
We need to be in the space-time continuum.
Okay.
There we are. We weren't that far off.
No, these are very early day references for Weird Barbie's house. And basically, Weird Barbie's house, and the middle one is a concept art by Eva. This is Weird Barbie's ambulance, which is fantastic. Which is like a snail, really. It's a house put on to the ambulance. So this is original work, and so basically it's the same principle as all the Barbie houses, but there is no right angles in it, and you know the thickness of which ended up being pink, the pink surround was absolutely as Barbie's house, but everything else is completely skewed. So you still see all the views off, but it's kind of like Greta described it in the script as Murakami and Gaudi in a blender. That's our starting point. So, and then if we keep moving through it, actually see if it comes up. That's a key reference, and keep moving on. Okay, that is a key reference, and keep moving on. So there's like 5 or 6 key references. They are.
So these all fed into
These are all. This is the clearest way of showing how references then feed into the concepts. That's another reference. Feed into the concepts that then, you know, we work out with Eva, that then feed into the art directors who then draw it up, and so it's a kind of...
But it also goes to the character of Weird Barbie, like she was once as beautiful as stereotypical Barbie, in that she has gone off kilter, the house has gone off kilter, everything around it, and that's a reference of the Sacker house.
Can we stick with that one?
If we pause on that. So this idea that Weird Barbie's house was like the Boo Radley house in Barbie Land. You know, it's a place you kind of go, oh, don't go there, it's very scary.
But it's not.
But it's not, of course. And, you know, the fact that it was like the Psycho house, which feeds into that's the shape, and then that's the shape that's on top of the Weird Barbie ambulance, which is like, for those that are older in the audience, the wacky races, the creepy coop in the wacky races. So we do a lot of things
we just do things to amuse ourselves, and somehow it gets through.
So you know, and that the whole thing is that it is a place of refuge as it becomes, and it has all the kind of rejects, like, you know, purple earring Ken or whatever.
Magic earring Ken and the ones who
they all come out of the woodwork.
They all come out of the woodwork. Yeah. So you know, so it is actually an amazing place. But this is how we arrive at these kind of concepts. Yeah,
it's really interesting that perfect example of it being a perfect example of reflection of character, like you said as well, and in a really vibrant way. The sort of, I think you said it's like the Barbie house crushed as
Yes,
well.
it is. It's like it's taken
Yeah.
and just pushed.
And also, this is how, you know, it's close collaboration with Jacqueline Duran, the costume designer, as well, because
Right.
it's the involvement of her, you know, and the colours and all of that, and her car, and everything is the same from Barbie Land, but
I mean, I think
distorted.
what this illustrates is what a long and kind of complicated process, and it's kind of when you're at the end, you look back on it and you go, okay, that's obvious, but it's not. When you're moving your way, finding your way through it and creating the worlds, it is complicated.
You're not quite sure where you're going to arrive, but you just keep moving. Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about the different worlds, when Ken comes back from the real world, can you tell us a little bit about how you approached that kind of bit of seepage between those boundaries of those worlds? Because he brings patriarchy back, doesn't he? How was that reflected in the design?
I think again that came from Greta, because it's very difficult for us not to give things an aesthetic. And like saying to Greta, do you really mean this ugly with everything that he loves and brings back? She said, absolutely. And then we talk about like bringing all these ugly things, and it was a relief because we could stop making everything, literally stop making everything or painting everything, and use things from the real world. And then because of the way the houses were, we had 22 big screens, you know, televisions, and they were all put, because there's no walls on the houses, they were at different, you know, strange and odd places, and that's a weird Barbie's cat, but strange and odd places in Kenland. But then when you saw it, and you saw the footage of the horses cantering slowly towards camera, and he's kind of like his unrequited love for Barbie, that ugliness forms a sort of beauty and forms a melancholia, and so it was fun to do Kendom, but once we'd got it into our heads that actually just go for it, and go for the mini fridges, go for the black sofas, go for all of that. But yeah, they were quite adorable, really.
So that's a transition. And so in the foreground you have the kind of double. I think got shot on the bike. You have the kind of the helix revolving, which is a Baroque theatre technique, you know, to represent waves and things. And so that one, there's the tulips going fast. That's how we did that. There's the 13-man tandem that doesn't move, but everything else is moving around them, so the camera's staying with them. The balloons are going up in the air, the windmills going. I mean, it's, you know,
really charming actually to watch, wasn't it?
It amused everybody when we were filming it, for sure. Yeah, complicated as well.
Yeah, and we're back on those mountains actually there. So that's an illustration of what you were talking about earlier with those gorgeous colours.
Yes, and this is again playing with the scale. So the ones on the stages were 35 foot high, and those are probably about 6 foot high. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, so you're scaling up and scaling down the whole time, and so you when you're watching the film, you're not quite sure where you are and what version of it. And then of course we have the miniatures, which are even smaller, and all the additional houses and kind of shop fronts and cinemas and things are all done as miniatures. So it's difficult to describe in.
I'm not sure if we've seen the beach yet on those slides, but could you talk briefly about the creation of the beach? Because that's the key space in Barbie Land as well, isn't it?
I think, and Sarah, you talk about it, I think there's something that really captures it. I mean, how, you know, in Barbie Land there's no electricity, there's no light, there's no white, there's no black. There's also no water, and yet you have all these beach sequences. So that was one to work out.
I mean, I think
there's some water.
There's some water. They revolve. Yeah, so that, in fact, they revolve, but we were initially thinking that maybe the on the beach the waves would go round, you know, and the mermaids pop up and all of that. But in fact, it's that whole thing of it being toy, you know, and hard, and you know, so when he runs into it, is like a perfect example of how what kids do when they play with toys. You know, if they go bang like that, or you know, whoa like that, they do that, and so it's kind of Greta's description of how you play with things that makes it, you think, okay, that's how it works, that's how it kind of comes together.
But the carving of those waves was lovely, and the painting of them was lovely.
So this is the Mattel boardroom, and what's interesting about that was that so Greta's description in the script was that it was a 6-year-old girl's pink and fluffy heart. you know, and that's the description of the Mattel boardroom. And the other thing she said about it is that it's kind of got a foot in both camps. It's kind of half in LA and half in Barbie land, you know.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's kind of got an unreality about it, which is, and the ghost of Ruth Handler, the creator of Mattel, lives on the 17th floor, you know.
And also you get, this is where we're often referencing other films, and this is the Wizard of Oz coming through again with the rainbow and also the...
And outside was on the cloth of LA, we kind of completely moved everything around, and we made downtown LA look like the Emerald City, but in gold, you know, and things like that. So
yeah, there's that shot through the window, isn't there, where it's the Emerald City, absolutely, and that's a beautiful reference.
And when they come back from the real world and it's Kenland is written in the sky, like the Wicked Witch has written, Go Home Dorothy. So there's lots of, like, you know, references to like the sound, Singing in the Rain and the Singing in the Rain movie when they do the Ken ballet.
And were those references, did they just emerge through conversations with Greta?
no, we watched. There's a lot of films that she talked about. That is her. That's Emerald City. There's a lot of films that she talked about that she really liked. You know, it's like there's a Jacques Demy, Umbrellas of Cherbourg in there. You know, and like the that's my photograph flying into LA with the Emerald City below in the smog. So it's like we watched them all, and she doesn't say specifically. Oh, that was our joke, putting Warner Brothers centre stage in that one. We had to get permission to do that as well. So, but yeah, it's kind of, you know. So we look at all these films, and it's like, where do they fit, and what's the reference? And it can be like the Mattel. You know, with all the little offices at the beginning, you know, when they jump over, you know, that's from Jack Tattie's Playtime. I mean, it's, you know, but so it's just like, when you find your way through it, finally find your way through it, and you think, yes, that's why, that would work really well here. And it's kind of almost retrofitting or applying it to, and then the whole sequence on the beach set was too small. You know, we should have built it on a stage 4 times the size, which I fought very hard for, and we couldn't afford it. So, you know, it's much, and I said, look, it's the whole third act is on this stage, not big enough, can't sustain it. And then we remembered Singing in the Rain, that wonderful sequence.
Yeah, with their Sid Charisse and the long scarf, when, you know, they go to this sort of expansive place.
And, you know, in Greece, where they're in the garage, and it suddenly goes, they go under the cars, and they come out, and they're dressed immaculately in black, and with the quiffs and everything, and it's the white walls, and it's clean. So that's why all the guys are dressed like that. So suddenly they go from this chaotic beach into the Dream Ballet, and that we could afford to do, because we only needed the stage for a week, just to paint the floor and build the rostra, simple costumes. And that's how the whole sequence at the end became much bigger. And that's how things change and develop as you're making a film. You know, you're just going, we're not going to sustain it. And it's
that
just
combination of
and it's last minute plans,
practical,
thinking,
creative, technical.
And that can force your creativity to go to a better way rather than keep them fighting on the beach.
Yeah.
It's more interesting when they go to that.
But, you know, and again, fighting on the beach is a piss take of, Private Ryan. where instead of landing craft, they're coming in on pedalos. And what Greta did, and she actually asked the question on the day, didn't she, when they were acting, and they were acting slow motion, right? So they're so funny, and she goes, am I going too far? It's just like, hang on a minute, this whole...
It looks normal now, but nobody had any idea what we were making at all. No.
So, am I going too far? Well,
too late.
It's too late. We've already, we're over there.
Committed.
I think it's coming to that time where we are going to get some questions from the audience. So thank you very much for all of your wonderful insights so far. Let's see what other questions people would like to ask. There's a question at the back here, yes?
Going back a bit to when you were talking about Anna Karenina and effectively the fact that the staging it all in the theatre came effectively out of budget concerns and was sort of a last-minute change. Knowing how the film ended up now, if you'd had the budget to film it in Russia, would you have filmed it as you originally planned, or would you keep the essence of how the film became and still keep it in the theatre as it was.
Hindsight. Yeah.
I think, without a doubt, and I'm speaking for Joe here, what we ended up with was much more interesting than what we would have ended up with, without a doubt. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
The three questions down here. Can we take the person nearest the aisle first of all? I think you were first. Thank you.
Hi. At the beginning of the Barbie section, we saw some mock-ups using actual toys. I'm wondering how frequently you use physical prototypes and models in the planning phases and how that comes in.
We didn't really use... we bought our first dream house on the show and played with that, but we did make models, you know, sort of scale models, just because of really a lack of time and to plan things and to show to Greta, because we'd never worked with her before. So, you know, going back to that shorthand you have with people, you know, if we do another film with Greta, there'll be a shorthand, but we did make quite a lot of models to explain to everybody what we were doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the process, model making, for explaining, and, you know, they can be digital, you know, or physical.
Everybody loves a physical.
Everybody loves a physical model, but we tend to do both, actually, now, you know, so, yeah.
But no real dolls.
No, we did have real dolls.
We had one, but they were just being played with in the office.
They were.
They were, yeah.
Lovely. I think another question further along, if you can pass that along, that'd be great. You're fighting over it.
We know each other, we'll fight later. So, throughout your talk, you seem to be finding a lot of creative outlets being told no. Like, no, you can't film in Russia. No, we can't afford a massive stage for this, so we'll change it into the dream sequence, which actually is my favourite bit of the film. So, how do you start processing it when someone says no and turn it into a creative outlet rather than a 2-year-old tantrum?
That's a very good question.
We do have 2-year-old tantrums as well.
I mean, yeah, get out your system.
I mean, actually, the whole thing about creativity, and I mean, I'm sure, you know, there's many artists of varying kinds, is parameters are a good thing, you know, and it's kind of like, you know, your budget might be £5, 5,000, 5 million, 50 million, whatever, you know, but whatever it is never enough, because you're going to push out those boundaries. And our job is to push at those boundaries and to get the best creative solution. So when you get the answer no, you understand it. There's not enough money, there isn't enough time. So you try and think of the best way, the best use of that money, the best use of that time. So being no doesn't mean you stop. Being no means you kind of go round it and find a different way. I'd say. Don't have a tantrum, which I have been known to do.
Have a tantrum, then get over it. Yeah.
And then while we're here, can we... Yeah.
Sure. So Barbie is clearly such an intellectually rich film, and there were so many discussions that obviously went into it. Was there anything that you found yourselves talking about a lot at the time of making it that you're surprised to find you're not talking about now, either because it just didn't come out in the film or because we've not yet picked up on it?
Probably. Yeah, there probably was, because there were so many conversations. And I mean, there's things that we shot in the film that aren't in it. There's a lot that was written that we couldn't do because the film would be another hour long. So there's a lot that could have happened if you think of where Kendom went and all of that, you know. And there's restrictions.
There aren't many regrets, actually. It's interesting, you know. On either film, actually there is a regret. We went back to LA a couple of weeks ago and we saw the In-N-Out burger place at the end of the runway, which is famous, because you go past LAX, which we call BAX. We should have done the In-N-Out burger there. That's a regret.
And at one point there was going to be another Barbie song to balance it out, and there was no time and money. So, yeah, there's always things.
There's always things. And it's interesting because, you know, things happen on a film and, you know, you have your heart set on this location and you lose it. So you choose that location, and then you think back and you think, what would it have looked like if we'd got what we originally wanted? And the same goes for casting. You know, that they often start with this person, this person, this person, and it changes to that, that, and that. and you just think, my God, what would it have been like if they'd been in it? You know, so it's a generally a good thing, actually, I suppose, intellectually. You know, and there's many conversations and many reasons, and yeah, it's a conversation. You move on. It's constantly moving.
Just constantly moving forward. Yeah, lovely. Next question. There's one here.
She's had it.
Oh. Ah. Sorry.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, because at the beginning you mentioned your origins in the theatre and how Anna Karenina is a translation from 3D to 2D in that sense. It follows the same kind of process. But when approaching Barbie, obviously the toys are a combination of 3D and 2D from the start, and obviously kids don't have that depth of field when they're children. How is the difference in creating that world coming from that basis of a mixture of 2D and 3D?
Do you know what? I'm going to not directly answer the question because I'm prone to do. But, you know, it's an interesting thing. I think children have an amazing perception of things, be they 3D, 2D, models, real, computer generated, you know. So you know, it's and I think that's what we play to a lot with what, particularly Barbie, you know. So the fact that there are things, they are tangible, you know, that kids will now know if something's made digitally or something is physically real, you know. And one of the big things that Greta wanted in Barbie was the fact that you could go in there and you could actually feel it, touch it, you know, it's tangible, you know. So I think that's
but saying that as well, you know, for us, we had this decal department, which we didn't understand what the word decal was because it's an American word and actually it just means sticker. And so it's like when she goes to the fridge and, you know, it has that sticker and the stickers on the books and that 2D, 3D quality took us back into the toyetic nature of the film. So you're always learning, I think.
Yeah, and also, you know, the essence of toy, what is a toy, you know, and so going into 3D and 2D, I mean, so, which in fact there were some references in Anna Karenina that we used in Anna Karenina and in Barbie, of dioramas. You know, so it's a very American museum thing. So, not at the museum, you see them a lot. So in American museums, you have these dioramas, and they are, again, like the transitions where you'll have a stuffed bear, for example, on his hind legs, and you have bits of real grass, and then literally 2 foot back, you'll be going into painted rocks, and then you go a bit further, and you go into false perspective, and it's all surrounded by a diorama like that, and it's only 10 foot deep. You know, and it's that thing that. I mean, I certainly, ever since being a child, I enjoyed that kind of fakery.
It's that fakery and it's playing as well, and, you know, we love that sense of play within film.
Yeah. So, you know, so that is another example of going from 3D into 2D, you know, and what's real, what's not real, what's in perspective, what's not, you know, perception. I don't know if there's an answer there.
There's actually some questions that have come in online. I don't know if you want to take one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a couple. Here's from Evie in West Hill. Evie Sims, you've spoken about miniatures a lot. Would you say miniatures and models are preferred to CGI where possible? Is there still an important place for the model makers in the industry?
I think it's really horses for courses. Do you know what I mean? We can create amazing worlds with CG. But going back to Barbie, it was a feel of a miniature that we wanted in Barbie. You know, so it's playing with, so it's almost like they are almost like the dolls' houses. So you're creating, and they're the most gorgeous things ever. You know, so you're creating, like the cinema is about that high. You know, it's that big, and it was, you know, so it had a tangibility that was a look we particularly wanted. That isn't to say it couldn't have been created in CG, but as well, it's a kind of megalomaniac thing for me. It's a way of controlling the look of it, the colouring of it, the lighting of it, and it's very specific.
And the miniature studio was amazing. So you had miniatures of Barbie Land all made. I mean, it was just a replica, and it was just stunning. And you would find Margot Robbie in there, or Greta in there. Just
People would hide in there.
Just having a moment in there, because it was so lovely.
Yeah. But I think, you know, whole worlds are made in CG, of worlds that we couldn't possibly, you know, achieve. And it just so happened that this film lent itself very much to miniatures.
Was there another question remotely, did you say?
Yeah, the one other question from Gordon, which is, what happens when in terms of world building, when an author disagrees with you?
That's a good one.
Author.
Yeah, author. Actually...
Well, Ruth Handler's dead.
Ruth... She wasn't really an author.
Tolstoy.
Actually, I'll tell you a funny story about
story.
Tolstoy.
Yeah.
Was that when we started working on Anna Karenina, we had from our some assistant from our American producers saying, "Oh, gee, could you please give me the email of Count Leo Tolstoy?"
Cell.
It's just like,
Yeah.
you know. So this is what you're dealing with. Yeah. I think, I mean, interestingly, living authors, we've worked with Atonement.
Ian McKellen.
McEwan. Yeah, and Christopher Hampton, who adapted it, and then Tom Stoppard, who adapted Anna Karenina.
And we've worked with a lot of writers who've written the script.
Yeah, so, and when it comes to disagreements, actually you can, for me, you only work to one master, and the master is the director. So anybody who's got something to say about what we say is...
And it's much easier.
Talk to them.
Something like Greta or someone who's the writer-director, it's great.
Yeah.
They just...
Yeah.
Yep.
But yes, you know, you can interpret things very differently, and I'm sure if they were living, I mean, what would Tolstoy have said?
What would Count Leo? Email him. Ask him.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
I think I'm being given a signal that we are out of time. So, thank you very much for all your questions, everyone. Thank you, Sarah Greenwood, Katie Spencer, absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, Jay.
And I just need to tell you that the next talk is in here at 2:45, AI and the big what if.
Oh, that's a good one.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.